All things trade are on the agenda at the APEC summit today, with U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping both addressing leaders of the Pacific Rim. The meeting is being hosted by New Zealand. It's held entirely as a virtual event. APEC members focused mostly on the slow recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic for the first days. In an earlier address to the group leaders, Mr. Xi warned that the region must not return to the tensions of the Cold War era. The comment was seen as a reference to efforts by the United States to blunt what they see as China's growing economic and military influence. We'll look further into the expectations of the APEC summit in a second here. First, let's take a quick look at the 21 members of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. The group represents nearly 3 billion people and 60% of the world's GDP, and includes some of the world's largest economies like the United States, Japan, or China. All right, let's talk more about what's at stake at the APEC meeting with Alicia Garcia Herrero, Asia-Pacific Chief Economist at Natixis Investment Bank. Good to have you on the program, Alicia. What do you expect from this meeting against the backdrop of COP26, which enters its final day today?
Well, this is an important meeting because there's a number of issues that we've not fully understood as we were heading to the end of COP26, in particular, China's real commitment to reduce coal in the production of electricity and more generally in its energy basket. There's been, quote unquote, an agreement with the US to do so, but at the same time, China has forcefully announced that it will continue its own path rather than commit to multilateral or bilateral. And so that has to be clarified, I would argue.
So when China's state and party leader Xi Jinping says that Asia-Pacific nations should make the post-pandemic recovery a green one, how much do you trust these words then?
Well, I mean, everybody has to reduce emissions, and I think it's positive to hear that, but it's not enough not to finance coal outside of China, which is what Xi Jinping has committed so far, but rather stop basically producing coal and consuming coal in China, or at least reduce it, obviously. So, in other words, I think the best way to believe these words is to hear what he has to say about his own commitment, i.e. China's reduction. By all means, China is the largest consumer of coal, followed by India and Indonesia. So China has to lead the way here, let alone the US, by the way. Also, the US needs to.
You mentioned the big two players here. I was going to get to here in a second. There's the growing competition between the United States and China, of course. Tensions have been building over Taiwan, human rights, and trade. Are there any easings of these tensions in sight, according to you?
Yes, but it's not a real easing. I would call it de-risking. I think the US is very keen to de-risk the situation, and the reason is not trade. It might be climate, but the most important reason is Taiwan, by all means and purposes, because we're very close to either a conflict or a mistake leading to a conflict. And therefore, I think the US is keen to de-risk the relation with China. And that's why we have all of these meetings lately, yeah.
And speaking of Taiwan, Taiwan and China both have applied to join a Pacific Rim Trade Pact, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. How is this going to play out?
Well, Taiwan tried when this was still an Obama initiative, TTP, and it didn't manage. It's just politically very difficult. It was very difficult for the US then, which probably was in a stronger position to let Taiwan in. So I think it's a lost cause. It's going to be very difficult. But to make it even harder, China probably, this is just my reading, accelerated its own application right before Taiwan, if you saw the timing, like 2 days before Taiwan. So kind of closing the door right there. So it's going to be very hard for Taiwan, unfortunately. Not a chance, in my opinion.
Alicia Garcia Herrero, Asia-Pacific Chief Economist at Natixis. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you.